Kristina Fisk. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm well.
Welcome to the show. Great to have you here. And you guys, you have a lot of specialties at Inosencio and Fisk.
We do. I am primarily working with companies. I do a lot of business law, real estate, and construction. Bruce handles the same things, but also handles some personal injury type work, so trucking accident cases and things of that nature. And we also do estate planning.
Yeah.
You're serving small business, and today you want to alert small business owners about a new requirement that is pretty serious business.
That's correct. So we have a federal statute that is called the Corporate Transparency Act, and that act is to promote financial information and disclosure of ownership interests in companies to help prevent things like money laundering and fraud and things of that nature. And so what has occurred is the U.S. Department of Treasury has authorized a division called FinCEN, which stands for the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, to create a process for reporting to the federal government who owns interests in companies.
Well, we've seen so many, well, just yesterday, some elderly Jackson resident almost was scammed out of $14,000 in cash. And we're seeing crypto crimes, all kinds of things.
That's right. So what this new process requires is to give the federal government, as much as people don't necessarily want to disclose information, it gives the federal government information about who is running companies, what those ownership interests look like, so that there is transparency. And when it comes to enforcement of financial crimes by those entities, particularly the U.S. Department of Treasury, they have what information they need to go after the correct people who are committing those types of crimes.
Kristina, what happens if you don't report?
If you don't report, there are some pretty hefty penalties that are incurred. So the time frame for reporting is dependent on when your entity was formed. If you're an existing company as of the first part of this year, you have until the end of 2024 to report. If you are newly formed in 2024, you have 90 days from when you are formed with your state agency to report. If you are a new entity after January 1st of 2025, you'll have 30 days from there forward to report. But the penalties are really steep. So $591 per day for every day that you haven't reported past the time frame that you're given.
Wow.
Up to $10,000 or 2 years of imprisonment in federal prison. So
Okay,
that's
now you're
kind of
scaring
harsh,
me a
right?
little bit. 2 years of imprisonment.
Right.
All right, where do you
Good
file?
news, we've already filed.
Okay, well, where do you file?
You file at fincen.gov.
Okay.
It is an entirely online process. You can only file online. You can either print out a PDF form and fill it out and manually upload it, or you can go through a process of step-by-step online filing. It's very straightforward. It walks you through it. There's also some publications on the FinCEN website that give you more instruction on what that looks like and what information you have to provide.
Now, once you've provided the government all this information, does the general public have access to that?
I don't believe so. Of course, we have data breaches and things of that nature all the time, but most of the information that you're reporting is also included in your tax returns. So the idea is you're not giving any overtly personal information. The information you do have to provide for an owner includes name, date of birth, address, and you have to provide them with some form of identification. You're not giving social security numbers, but you are providing with a driver's license or a passport or a state-issued ID so that they can put a picture with the person's name.
Kristina, you talked about money laundering and avoiding some things like that. What are some other financial crimes that are being committed where people don't want to know who owns certain interests in companies?
That's a really good question. I was just reading recently about preventing entities from using their entity to fund terrorist organizations, which is a really interesting concept because those tend to be shell companies, and the members of an LLC or the shareholders of an entity might not be easily traceable. And so that would be one thing where if you have to give this information up front, they're trying to prevent that kind of funding.
I read yesterday in Cranes that MDON filed for bankruptcy. They're not paying creditors, they're not paying U of M, but they're paying themselves $1 million as owners. So does that kind of information become then available to people seeking, I guess, retribution or compensation?
I don't know the consequences of that per se yet, but I'm guessing that the answer is yes, because if you have financial crimes of that nature, it now becomes a criminal act that either the U.S. Department of Treasury or our federal government is investigating, and they're going to go straight to the source and find out from FinCEN who are those beneficial owners and have interest in those entities, so they can figure out who the wrongdoers are.
And we're not saying that's a financial crime that existed with that situation, but it's an example of questionable.
Yeah, you know,
Yeah.
you don't know. Yeah,
We don't
finding
know,
out, you know,
so-
you don't know who all owns the company, things like that. But yeah, again, maybe certain owners of a company are paying themselves out $1 million a year to, again, someone who shouldn't
Right.
even be involved with the company.
So what companies, like, you know, a small mom and pop, or?
Great question. So typically speaking, if you are an entity that is formed with a state agency, like in Michigan we have LARA, the licensing and regulatory authority that we have here in Michigan. So LLCs, corporations, nonprofit organizations do not have to file because they don't typically have beneficial owners. So generally speaking, LLCs and corporations.
Yeah, so someone that does like auto detailing on weekends.
If they are just a sole proprietor and they don't have a formed entity, a registration with LARA through the state of Michigan, that is not a required reporter. Required reporters would be someone who has filed with the state of Michigan LARA to obtain articles of organization or articles of incorporation for entity status.
Well, if you're a small business, you really need to have a good team around you, whether it's a team of attorneys, team of accountants, team of advisors, because you don't want to miss some of this stuff and
Yeah.
end
Right.
up 2 years behind bars.
Well, luckily, Willis and Jurasek, our accountant, they've taken care of this for us.
Thank you.
Will you take care of this for
Yes,
people?
we do. I would say any company that is inquiring whether it has been completed or not should check with their accountant and with their attorney. I've done several of these online reportings. They're very simple and straightforward, and quite frankly, most people could probably handle it on their own if they have the right info.
Awesome. Well, very important information, and I'm sure news to a lot of small business owners. Thanks for coming in today.
Thanks for having me. I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
From attorneys at law, Inosencio and Fisk, Kristina Fisk. More of the morning show after this.